love to take questions to find out what you'd like to know.
We've got mics in the audience, so please wait until the mics get to you before you ask the question. Right there, front.
Okay. So you really showed tremendous compassion and vulnerability in this movie and shared intimate parts of your life that for me are unimaginable that I could ever do something like that. How did you evolve as a person, and when did you finally have the courage to sort of let all of that information come out?
Well, that was an interesting process, interesting journey, because in 1993, I was doing a play in New York, Jeffrey, and so I played the role of Darius. And so every night, night after night, I played this character who is out and proud, and on TV, he was a chorus boy in Cats, lived in a penthouse, didn't pay rent. Dumb, huh? So I was able to live out through this character some of my fantasies. And so through that process, I reached out to a friend of mine, Robbie Brown, and I said, I'd really like to write a book. And so he introduced me to Eric Marcus, and we sat and talked for a while. Actually, the first book he just finished was the Bob and Rod Paris Jackson book. And I was like, I couldn't get through the first chapter. You know, I said, you're gonna have to do better than this, okay? So then he sent me Making History, the struggle for LGBT human rights. And that's what really sold me, that I really wanted him to be my co-author, and we'd work together. And so I felt at that moment in time that I was sharing all of my weaknesses. You know, it's not real masculine to admit that you were raped. I was an Olympic athlete, you know. That doesn't happen to Olympic athletes, right? I was in an abusive relationship. I stayed in that relationship for 6 years after that, you know, believing that I deserved it. And so also sharing my sexual identity, finally coming forward with that, sharing my HIV status. And what was amazing was once the book was published in '95, little did I know, Random House made Eric sign a contract that he would have the book done within 1 year, because Random House was afraid that I was going to die. And so, showed them, didn't I? But yeah, so when we went on book tour, it was so amazing. And that's when I realized by sharing my perceived weaknesses, I was actually sharing my strength. Because people were coming up to me and saying, you saved my life. I had so many instances where you know, people shared their stories with me, and I know that I'm the only person that they shared those stories with at that moment in time. I remember being in Atlanta, and you know, people forget. I mean, Reverend Fred Phelps followed me around the country. So, I mean, it was so funny because like one of the first speaking engagements after the publishing of the book was in Lawrence, Kansas. And so it was right in his backyard, right? So I'm there, and he's standing outside across the street with his signs, you know, die AIDS faggot, and you'll burn in hell, and pictures of me with 666 on my forehead, and all this stuff. And it was so cute because the people who were putting on the event, they wanted to protect me from that. I said, no, I want to see it, you know. And so, you know, they brought me to this window, and I peered out, and I saw that, and I said, oh, that's so cool, you know. And of course, when I get there, because when there's any controversy, you know, it is standing room only. So, I mean, the people came out in droves. And so during the Q&A, one of the audience members says, well, Mr. Louganis, what do you think of the ignorance that's standing outside this building? And I said, oh, you mean Fred? And they kind of chuckled, and I said, you know what? I feel like I should hand him a teddy bear and tell him he needs lots of hugs, because anybody who spews that much hate can't like themselves very much. And so the LGBT student union sent him a bunch of teddy bears in my honor, telling him he needs lots of hugs, which I thought was so cool. And then another event, I was speaking in Florida, and I had this young gentleman, Michael, said, you know, well, what do you do about the hate, you know, being LGBT? And I thought it was done, so I was going to tell him the story about Reverend Phelps, but he continued, he said, even when it comes from your own family. And that just stunned me. I just couldn't imagine. And I said, first off, come here. And I got down off the podium and gave him a hug. And, you know, I told him, I said, you know, you have to know that you're a good person. You know, you have to have, you know, faith in that, you know, and believe in yourself that you're a good person. Yeah, so, you know, I've had the good fortune to live longer than I thought I was going to live, but also have some pretty amazing experiences through this process. I wasn't inducted into the San Diego, since I grew up in San Diego, I wasn't inducted into the San Diego Hall of Fame initially for reasons of homophobia, and then I would usually do that for my mom so that she could get all dressed up, because she loved that, you know, and she was so proud, and so I enjoyed doing that for her, you know, not so much for myself. And she passed in '04. And so I was competing in dog agility at the time, and this guy said, well, why aren't you in the San Diego Breitbart Hall of Fame? I said, well, you know, I just did that for my mom, and she's no longer here. And my cousin read that article, and so at my mom's memorial, we gave out these roses. I got these gold roses that had red enamel, because my mother loved roses. And so she sent that to me, and she said, I will stand in for your mom, because I want you to be inducted into the San Diego Hall of Fame. And you know, that day I had no idea what I was going to say. I had no clue. And it was amazing, I mean, how the universe works. That morning I got an email, well, actually it was a Facebook message, from this young boy. And he said, you're not going to remember this, but 15 years ago you came to Salem, Oregon for your book signing. And I was the first one in line, and you signed all of my pictures, and I even had a picture of you and your deaf Harlequin Great Dane, Ryan Luke. And so you signed Believe in Yourself, what you usually sign, and you also signed your name, and then you signed for Ryan Luke, and you drew a paw print. And he said, in that moment in time, I decided that I was not going to end my life that night. And so, I've had the good fortune to, to have these experiences, because you never know what kind of impact you're going to have. Just a simple, little act of kindness, or giving somebody a little extra time. You never know what kind of impact that's going to have. I have another story about, they were concerned about my safety on my book tour. So a lot of times I had I hate to say bodyguard, but security. And when I was in Atlanta, there was an officer, and she was like this Amazon woman, beautiful Amazon woman, and she said, "Mr. Louganis, can I have a word with you?" And so she pulled me to the side and she handed me a bullet. And she said, "The significance of me handing you this bullet is you have done so much for me, and that I would take a bullet for you." And that was so unbelievable, and I still have that bullet. I mean, it's in my my jewelry box, and I open it up and it's right there. So yeah, it's amazing.
Greg, if you could redo that interview with Larry King now, what would you say to him?
If I could, I'm sorry, if I could.
If you could redo that interview with Larry King.
If I could redo that interview.
Showed in the movie because he asked you, well, you're intelligent, why didn't you practice safe sex?
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, and it's really interesting too, because, everybody likes to blame Jim for infecting me, but I honestly don't believe that it was Jim, because my previous lover, Kevin Perry, who's an artist, we were together for 4 years, and I went to his memorial. And so it was before we knew about safe sex. So I don't think people like to point at Jim, but I really don't think that it was him. And also, it really doesn't matter,
He was trying to discredit you, to make you look like you had done something stupid.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything stupid,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. The accusation was that how can somebody be irresponsible or whatever. But you know what? Accidents happen, and also, I'll share with you as well. I mean, I've been sober 8 years, so I'm very good friends with Bill W. So it's a lot of things happen. Accidents happen, stuff happens. It was interesting because I got this note, this email, and it was really cryptic, and I wasn't sure who sent it and where it was going to. It was kind of untraceable, and so I took a chance and I answered it, and I said, if you need to talk to someone, because it sounded rather distressful. As it turned out, it was a young man who is in the entertainment industry, and he seroconverted. And so he was reaching out to me, and then we conversed back and forth, and he was going to his doctor's appointment to talk about treatment options. And I said, what time is your doctor's appointment? Because he happened to be in LA, and I was in LA at the time. And so I said, okay, I'll meet you there. And so I was there, and then I go into his appointment, and of course I knew the doctor. He was one of the doctors at the gay games in Chicago. And so, he went through the treatment options, and, I was diagnosed in '88, so I've been through every treatment option, from AZT, all the D4T, DDI, went through the protease inhibitors, stuff, all of those things. So I was very familiar with the side effects and reactions. So after he had his meeting with the doctor, I sat with him for an hour and a half to 2 hours, sharing my experience with the various medications. Fortunately, the treatments now are much more tolerable. So now I just take my meds in the morning and meds in the evening and go about the business of living.
We have a question over here. It's from me. What's next?
What's next?
What's next for you?
What's next? Well, I'm doing a lot more acting. I just did a play reading in New York, spring at the Willowbrook Inn. And it's kind of like same time next year meets Brokeback Mountain. And it's a wonderful story. So we're actually looking for someplace to do it in New York, and look for me June 12th in Entourage the movie. I also did a little student film called Saber Dance, and it was so funny because the student it was his master's thesis. And it was about the composer Aram Chimyakin, who wrote Saber Dance. Khachaturian is his last name. And so I went in to read for the lead, and then I was the casting director's first choice, but the director found an actual Armenian, he's an Armenian, to play the role. And then it was his meeting Salvador Dali. And so the casting director was like going through pictures and all, not sleeping at night, and like for 3 days. And my picture just like dropped out of the pile and said, oh my God, Greg Louganis. And so I played Salvador Dali. And my agent was like, well, you're not getting paid for this. I said, hey, if it doesn't cost me any money, why not? Because what casting director is going to cast me as a character? So it was a great opportunity to play and do that. And it was so sweet because Ilya, is too young. He didn't know, and from Russia, and so he didn't know who the heck I was. And he came to the Outfest and saw the movie, and he was just dumbfounded. He said, I just thought you were an actor.